You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
At first, the national pundits weren't giving her much of a chance, but just recently, from the Cook Political Report, a ray of optimism, perhaps some momentum for Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan. She's the Democrat joining us now, and good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had you back before the primary election. You won,
Yep.
Emerging victorious in the field of Democrats there. And now you're facing what's, by the map and the polling, looks like an uphill battle, but Cook Political Report recently just said that this is moving from likely Republican to leaning Republican, which puts you in, I guess, better territory. How do you feel about the prospects of your campaign so far?
We feel very good. It was nice to see Cook Political Report recognize on a national level what we have seen on the ground for a long time, and that people are ready for change, and they're ready for somebody who really, truly represents the 13th District in Central Illinois.
This district, your race with Representative Davis is really sort of a national measuring stick. A lot of national politicians are looking at this and saying if Democrats can flip that seat from red to blue, well, that just may be a good indicator that Democrats are poised or well on their way, if not clinching the full takeover of the House. No pressure, but but that's the position that you find yourself in. That has to be an interesting motivator, I suppose, for you.
Well, in no way do I think that this is going to be an easy task to accomplish. But I know what I see, I know what I hear on the ground, and we do have the energy, we have the momentum, we have people who are ready to work. And I know a lot of people talk about a blue wave, and I say it's not going to be a wave, it's going to be blue sweat that flips this seat. It's going to be a lot of work, and people are ready to do it.
Let's talk about what happens if you win. You've got presumably a president still in office for this term, which is the term you're running for currently, 2 years. And there are questions about how a Democratic House would mesh with the White House, because you have to get a signature on a lot of things. You, on Wednesday night, held your first town hall of many, and we heard there from several people who dealt with opioid problems, and they saw addiction in Macoupin County. The Macoupin County Sheriff even said with the drugs that come up over our southern border, people are dying. People are going to jail. Lives are being shattered and ruined across the county. So many people in jail, they don't even have enough beds for them.
I know.
He painted a pretty grim picture there.
He did.
The president has said this is an issue of immigration and that we have to lock down the border. And I know that this whole issue of immigration reform has been rather sticky or difficult for Congress to tackle in the last 20 or 30 years. So give us an idea, what are some concrete steps, what are some specifics that you are prepared to support or vote for in terms of immigration reform and a secure border?
Well, clearly we need immigration reform, and we have to have security at our borders. I think that the southern border, of course, has issues. We also have a lot of ports that need to be secure. We have a big border in the United States. So it's a big problem, not just at the southern border, but it's around the nation. And so making sure that we are fully funding our border patrol and making sure that we are locking that down is going to be really important to lock down the drugs.
Of course, there are a lot of different issues. When you talk about immigration, you can expand it all of a sudden to people who fly here and overstay their visas, and there's all of that broader conversation. But on the issue of drug trafficking, there is a direct link between Mexico, Central America, South America even, and some of the physical product that crosses that border there. I heard you talking at that, I was able to cover that event, and I heard you talking about...
Thank you for being there, by the way.
Well, of course, we want to cover these races for Congress. They're important to a lot of our people in the audience. But what other steps do you think... The president has said, and this is a district that supported President Trump in 2016, that he wants to be tough on crime and this issue of drugs specifically. At the same time, the nation is wrestling with reducing mass incarceration and trying to rethink how we treat drug problems and people who are involved in it. Give us an idea how Congress might be able to act next to reduce the drug trafficking trade.
Well, in addition to reducing the flow of traffics in, and we do have to secure our borders. We do have to fight drugs being brought into our nation at the southern border, at any border. That's a big issue. And domestically, we need to make sure that we are providing care for people who are abusing drugs because they're addicted. You know, we have such a need, as you heard the sheriff say last night. We don't have enough inpatient care. There aren't enough beds for people to seek treatment. And so then they get out of jail, they relapse, and then they end up right back in this vicious cycle. And in order to do that, we really have to work with our communities and make sure that we have the treatment available to get these people off drugs and get them reintegrated into our community.
You've talked a lot about, there was another person at this town hall Wednesday night who raised their hand and said, hey, you know, for me to go to a specialist, I have to go all the way to St. Louis. But the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, they're run on a state exchange. And so an Illinois patient has difficulty getting, you know, their insurance doesn't want to work with a doctor in St. Louis, where that's their closest specialist for someone in the southern part of your district. So President Trump and congressional Republicans have said, allow people to cross state lines to buy health insurance. So that we have these, quote, artificial borders in their rhetoric that prevents people from going across state lines. You had a bit of a different proposal or solution. Explain how you would address this.
Well, part of the problem with what President Trump's administration is proposing in terms of the health insurance is that states have very specific rules about insurance within their states. And so to cross borders, it doesn't mean that if you buy something in Illinois, it's going to mean the same thing in a surrounding state, or vice versa. And
Explain
so
that. It won't be the same thing. What do you mean?
Well, it won't be. It may not cover everything that you as a consumer need it to cover. It may be catastrophic, but it may not cover a specialist. There are things that, you know, these are issues that are thoroughly vetted within our state legislature and at the federal level. And that's why it's important to make sure that any insurance meets certain qualifications so that people can have the access that they need and the coverage that they need.
So you talked about expanding Medicare.
As a public option, I think it would be a really interesting idea. In some of our communities, we don't have enough competition, and Medicare, the structure of Medicare is everywhere, pretty much. And so offering it as a public option that somebody could buy into.
And just to be clear, you're talking about people that don't necessarily qualify for the age limit now. How old would you have to be under this proposal?
Well, I think there's different ways to look at it. You could look at it as age-related, or you could look at it as geography-related. You know, some of our smaller communities could really benefit from another option, another insurance option that they could buy into. So I think it's an interesting idea to look at expanding it as a public option geographically.
Now, a public option in the past has often been discussed. Even some of the architects of the Affordable Care Act, Jonathan Gruber, the professor from MIT, talked about this at length and said that basically, and President Obama even talked about what a public option might look like. And that's where states or the federal government supplies subsidies to these different public options to artificially lower the cost and give people a discount. So you're going to customers in a marketplace that are buying health insurance and saying you can have a cheaper health insurance plan than that private company over there, but it's really being underwritten and that price is being dragged down because taxpayers are footing the bill for it, right?
I think the structure would have to look a little bit different when you offer it as a public option, because people haven't necessarily paid into it, right? Because they haven't reached the age limit. So it really would have to take some restructuring to figure out what the costs would be.
But the question then is who pays for it?
Right. Well, the infrastructure is already in place, and we know that it's already there. So that's a big benefit
on the insurance side,
right? Because
but it's not fully funded until they reach
right.
Because
you're
age.
not right. So if you're going to, so their costs, an individual like you or me, our costs would be different than somebody who is 65, but it still might be cheaper, more affordable, offer us more accessibility if it is open to us in a rural community.
Another person attending your town hall, I'm just going to keep rehashing some of these questions. They were good questions.
Yeah.
A patient, or I suppose they were a patient, but also a voter, potential voter, said, why not Medicare for all? If I can translate, it sounded like you weren't prepared to go that far left. You know, right now, we need to fix what's broken. And right now, the GOP in Congress are doing everything they can to undermine the ACA. And that patient bill of rights is something that we've seen people push back because we want to protect it. And so making sure that we fix what's broken, let's do that first.
and then let's move forward and let's figure out the best way that we can move forward to expand accessibility and make this healthcare more affordable.
There's some reluctance on the part of Midwestern Democrats to go that far left, and this is widely talked about. The New York Times had an op-ed recently. The author grew up in Kansas. You may have seen this, but she wrote that many, her parents and many of their neighbors, the active voters in that particular district in Kansas, happen to agree with a lot more of the proposals from the recent New York congressional candidate, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but yet many of their elected officials were white Republican men who have been there for a long time. And so she was making the argument that Democrats should go full bore down that path following after the Democratic Socialist Party, some of these things. And yet we hear from Senator Durbin and others, James Comey recently, even arguing that Democrats shouldn't go that far left because they have to firmly plant the flag in the middle of the political spectrum. Where do you come down on that? Again, reframing all this, if you win this race, it could be a sign that Democrats are surging back to retake the House. So it's interesting to hear your perspective. What should the face of and the direction of the Democratic Party look like in the next congressional term?
Well, you know, I am born and raised right here in Springfield. I went to school at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I have raised my own family right here. I am a product of Central Illinois, and my main concern is that I listen to the people around the district. I think now I've put about 48,000 miles on my car, getting around the district and listening to people, and to me it's not just a title, it's a job. If I'm going to be the representative, then I have to listen and take my nod from the people that I'm hearing from. And I think I reflect that in fixing the ACA first and then figuring out how we're going to go forward.
So, but are you saying that the district here is more moderate, and that's what I'm hearing from people. I was asking a question about.
I mean, I do a lot of listening, and I think people right now are scared about what they're losing. They're scared about drug prices that are being hiked up, and immediately what they want is somebody to stand up for them and fix what's broken.
You talked about this being a job, and I've heard you say that a few times, that you're applying for a job. I suppose when you're applying for a job, there'd be a job interview, right? So
that's what they do.
I've also noticed an emerging theme in how your campaign introduces you as an entrepreneur, a self-employed business owner, and that, from some of your campaign materials, quote, gives you firsthand knowledge of the challenges faced by small businesses. What are some of those challenges, and why is it important to you to make that such a central part of your introduction to voters?
Well, I think that I've been self-employed for over 20 years, and it poses its own challenges because whether it's with taxes, whether it's with health insurance, things that you don't have a structure around you to rely on, you have to do it yourself. So you have to have you have to dig in, and you have to pay attention to the details, and making sure that people have access to some of the basics that you need to run a business. And so when people are telling me that they're in rural areas, their broadband is slow, or it just cuts off, or they don't have cell service, as somebody who's worked for herself for a long time, that would be devastating. And I can relate to their concerns.
Yeah. So you worked at several places over the last 20 years, right?
For the last 7.5, my primary contract was with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation.
So you had a contract there to complete work or deliver a certain service for them. This was a business that you ran? You said.
Well, it's just like I said, I've been self-employed, so I could take on different contracts.
Did you have any employees or?
No.
Okay. So a lot of politicians present themselves as an entrepreneur or a job creator. I just want to be clear about your background.
Yeah, I've been self-employed. Yeah.
So you had a job, right?
Right.
But you weren't necessarily a job creator.
I was not an employer. No.
Okay, not an employer at any time. And so this was a contract with the Abraham Lincoln. Was there something else before that where you were an entrepreneur?
I worked for Senator Dick Durbin. I've done graphic design. I've also done writing. I've done copy editing. I've done a lot of different things. When I became self-employed, we had just had our second son, and I really needed to make sure that I could balance my work and home life. And so I became self-employed so that I could maintain my own schedule and work during nap times, night times, weekends, and raise the kids at the same time.
Certainly, and I think most people would agree that being a mother is one of the most noble jobs a person could have.
Thank you.
But also, I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on, so a lot of people say they're entrepreneurs, and that means they're job creators, but at no time during this 20-year span you described, did you have employees or a payroll or?
I did not manage a payroll other than my own.
Okay. Very interesting. So you also had a job with, you said, with Dick Durbin as well. He's been, how has he been important to you? He's obviously a very powerful member of this U.S. Senate. You worked with him. What is it about Senator Durbin that you hope to take from him and use in your political career?
You know, I think one of the most important, he's very forthright and honest, and he'll tell people, you may not always agree with me, but you'll know where I stand. And I think that's an important quality in an elected official. And he also, the way that he interacts with constituents, he puts himself out there all the time, face to face, nothing between him and the voters. And he listens. And I think listening has got to be the number one most important quality that you should have as an elected official, is standing in front of your voters and listening. That's how you know what's on their minds. You have to ask the question.
If I can interpret that a little bit, if you'll indulge me, it sounds like when a politician says, you may not always agree with me, but you'll know where I stand, that gives the connotation that at times a politician is willing to, maybe to use John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, to vote against what maybe the popular thing in their district is, but because they think it's the right thing. Give me an example of what that would look like from you.
I think we're going to have to wait until I get elected for that, because right now my number one job is listening to the people in the 13th and taking their voice forward.
Senator Durbin was, I think, the first politician from Illinois to publicly support President Trump's suggestion that he might release Rod Blagojevich from jail. I believe your husband was a lawyer, a government lawyer for Governor Blagojevich back in the day. For the state of Illinois, not for his defense team.
Correct.
To be clear. Where are you on that? Do you think that Governor Blagojevich has served enough time and that he should get to go out, or do you think that the crimes he's been indicted and convicted of, he should serve the full term? What do you think? Yeah,
to be honest, I am so busy getting out into the district and listening to voters and trying to run this race and flip this seat. I have not given it any thought.
But this would give us an idea of, when you think about the Rod Blagojevich scandal, it's an idea of ethics in government, and it would be an interesting question to any politician running for office. What did you think of his sentence?
They had a lot of issues. I mean, I think that Governor Blagojevich had a lot of issues. I think that he was dealt with fairly, and beyond that, I don't have an opinion.
So you would not?
I think he was dealt with fairly by the government.
Okay, so to be clear, the president is the only person who could actually let him out early. A member of Congress wouldn't have that power, but it sounds like you're not ready to say that he's served enough time, like Senator Durbin has said.
That's not my place to say. What I do think is that he broke the law. They proved he broke the law, and the government served the justice they thought was due.
You talked a lot at your event about more federal grant money. This is an interesting concept. Maybe we don't do a good enough job in the press covering this very well, but Illinois is one of the last states in the nation. We're a debtor state, right? We pay more to the federal government than we get back from. Right. Most states have a surplus in that category where they pay some amount, say for $100 to the federal government, they get $120 back. We get less. We get pennies on the dollar. And there are real questions about how members of Congress from Illinois can do a better job at raking some of that investment capital back to support the infrastructure here in Illinois. How would you go about doing that, increasing Illinois' position in Washington to do a better job at investing in this state?
I think part of it is being on the ground and seeing what people need and seeing where the dollars are going and who's making the requests, so that it's personal. And infrastructure. I mean, I think that during the campaign, President Trump talked a lot about infrastructure. We haven't seen anything. And that is an area I would happily work with him or anybody, because we have so many infrastructure needs here in central Illinois. Our roads, our bridges, our electrical grids, our pipelines, our waterways. We still have a digital divide. And I would love to be in Washington, D.C., fighting for central Illinois to receive some of those infrastructure dollars to come back. Our farmers need the waterways deepened and widened, to move product. We have a lot of infrastructure needs, and those are jobs. Those are jobs that can't be shipped overseas. That money pumps right back into the local economy, and I will be loud and proud fighting for infrastructure dollars for Central Illinois.
How do you think the president has done so far?
Well, I think that there's been, it's on a day-to-day basis. I think we need to, it's hard to gauge, frankly. I think that, you know, the economy in some ways has gotten a little bit stronger, but the tax reform right now is really hurting people.
You called it a tax scam.
It is a tax scam, yeah. It's, you know, the people that I listen to are all well aware that that tax scam was not for them. It's for the super rich, it's for corporations. We just saw more numbers come out today that we are at a historic low for corporation taxes being paid to the federal government.
Before they were cut, we were the highest first world country in the world on corporate tax rates.
It's at a 75-year low, and I think we're closing in on $1 trillion deficit. That's a problem, and it should not be paid on the back of middle-class working families.
All right, to get that job, you've got to beat Rodney Davis. We haven't talked about him much here today. You're going to debate him, I assume, a few times?
That's the plan. I hope so.
Okay.
I mean, we've been asked to debate, and we have absolutely agreed.
So how many debates? Give us an idea what we're looking
I
at.
actually don't know.
You don't know yet?
No, I'm not sure, because people have reached out to us, a couple of universities have reached out to us to ask us if we would agree to a debate, and absolutely I want to, and that's what I've heard so far. I don't know if Rodney Davis has agreed or not.
All right. Well, I think we've gotten to know you a little bit better, the candidate, and some of your positions, and so thanks for spending some time with us here today, and I'm sure these issues and how you contrast with the congressman will come into clearer focus as we get closer to November, so thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, I appreciate it, and thanks again for coming last night.
All right, look at that, a handshake. We don't get that very often. Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan, thanks for joining us. We're back in just a moment with a look at what is shaping up to be the most expensive race for governor in American history.